Hello, I am Glori and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 20th, 2005, and my home group is the First 164 Big Book Study in SeaTac. It's Wednesday night. It's a 1-hour meeting. It starts at 7. I invite anybody to come. It is really an awesome meeting. It has grown over the last 2 years. We started that meeting 2 years ago. I guess this is where I'm going to start. 2 years ago, I was sitting in prayer. It was, COVID was over and I was at a home group and I didn't want to leave a home group because I have a resentment and, I didn't want to take my coffee pot and go somewhere else. And so I sat in prayer for 2 years, God, if this is what you want, please, let it happen. And I was doing a concept study, which was so much fun with my friend Tammy over there. And I said, this reminds me that I really want to start this meeting, and I've been praying about it for a couple of years. And she said, what can I do to help? And God orchestrated the rest, right? We put our feet to the floor and we opened that meeting. It'll be 2 years next month, and God is doing amazing things there. I am just that we meet. We do not run to our cars and drive away after the end of the meeting. The parking lot is full of fellowship. Thank you. Yeah, there's the nerves. There they are. Anyway, when I come up here to speak, I don't want it to be my voices that's heard. I want it to be the voice of Alcoholics Anonymous, the voice of God, right? And what he's done in my life. And when I first got here, I was so angry at the world, and I blamed everybody and everything for anything that's happened in my life. I could never take any accountability or responsibility. And in the doctor's opinion, it says, unless the person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. And I fully believe that, because I needed to change on a complete gut level. And, and there is a solution. It talks about the great fact is this and nothing less, that we've had deep, effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way in which indeed is miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. And like I said, when I got here, I was angry. I had a grudge towards my mom. I didn't grow up in a happy, functional household. I grew up in a very dysfunctional household. My mom was a stripper and my dad was one of her customers, and that's how they met, and then there was like this pregnancy and this marriage, and neither one of them were old enough or capable enough to be married and raise a child, and it was really volatile. And my dad decided that he'd had enough when I was 5 months old, and I am left with this 19-year-old child trying to, deal with this little baby. And, my mom tells stories of me being I was born in San Francisco, California, and my first home was a seedy hotel on Eddy Street in San Francisco. And my crib was a drawer out of one of the dressers, and my mom talks about, waving the cockroaches off my body, so that was my beginning, and both of my parents are alcoholic and addict, and my dad decided 5 months he was gone, and my mom, she was a narcissist and she really needed a lot of attention, and so it was really hard for her to give it to me, right? And she was in one relationship after another, and when sometimes when we are up here at the podium, it does say in the book, to tell our stories in a general way. And, for me, I don't have a problem in a mixed meeting talking about some of the things that happened. One of the reasons why I came in here so angry is I hated my mom. My mom did nothing. She let the man come into my room and do the things to me that he was doing, and she did nothing to stop it. And and that's what I had. I had no protection. I had no care. She was very, very good at making sure that she would hug me, tell me she loved me. We had a roof over her head, and she did everything she could to make food, sure that we had food in our bellies too. I mean, she did what she was capable of doing, and she didn't come from a very great situation herself. And so in 1979, my mom found these brothers that had been taken away from my grandmother, because my grandmother was also a pretty volatile person. And my mom decided that she was going to quit her job with the county of Santa Clara, sell every belonging that we had, I had a little brother at this time, and put us in this van and move us up here to Washington so she could connect with these long lost brothers, right? And it was going to be this great romantic situation. And it didn't work out. It's like they wanted nothing to do with, the brothers. They didn't want anything to do with my grandmother or anybody else. And so it wasn't great. And that was in 1979. I was about 12 years old. And at that time I was, need my water, sorry. um, at that time, I was really still a geeky little girl. I was 12 years old, and I really, even though I saw my mom at her party life, I mean, they thought it was cute when I was a kid. The adults would blow the pot in our face, and I'd pick up the drinks around the party room. That was the kind of exposure I had. And then when we moved here to Washington, and I got registered for middle school, we walked up to the school, and I kid you not, like we were in Renton, and it was McKnight Middle School, and on the front doors, big black letters, drugs. That's all it said was drugs, right? And I'm like, all right, cool. This is what I'm gonna be, right? And sure, I had an idea of what drugs and alcohol were, but when I started at school, I pretended like I knew what they were. Right. I like my girlfriend. It's funny. I was thinking about this when you come. Anyway, she's like, oh yeah, I party, and I'm like, yeah, me too. A couple of years later, we found out neither one of us did. And that's what got me started, right? And I was off and running from the get go. And every time I picked up a drink, I would always drink to blackout. It never failed. And it just never failed. All of the stories that go through my mind when I get asked to speak, I mean, like one of my very first drinks, I hadn't blacked out, but I was drunk, and I come home and my neighbor's house is on fire, and I'm like, woohoo, fire trucks, and my mom is just like, oh my God, right? And I fall off the porch into the hydrangea bush, and it just, oh God, it was kind of a mess. But at that point, it was just like, hey, this is fun. I'm a teenager. I'm a kid. And so that's what I was doing. I think like Raman is, it's like it was just this every weekend I'd go and party, the keggers up in the hills and everything. And, and then it started to really become a problem where it really became it was my identity and it was my life. And I was, one of my dear lovely friends was talking sharing in a meeting here a few weeks ago, and when she was talking, it prompted this memory that I had that was kind of buried. I mean, it's those blackout drinks. We drank. We're at this apartment complex. We decide we're going to go skinny dipping. I go in the pool, and I remember nothing after that except for waking up in a stairwell somewhere completely naked and completely alone. Right? Just fucking. Oops, sorry. I don't usually do that. Just terrifying. Just terrifying. And it's like, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to do this again. And well, guess what? 4 hours later, they're like, hey, the party's down the road, right? I'm like, okay, here I'm coming. I'm going. And so I was off and running like that. And that wasn't the lowest of the low. That wasn't the lowest of the low. Another time I'm like, I'm again, I'm in Renton, I'm up on Skyway. We're at a party, somebody fills my hand full of pills, have no idea what they are. I put them in my mouth and I wash them down with some black velvet, right? We're headed to some party in the Renton Highlands on foot, right? The last thing I remember is crawling down Sunset Avenue. I'm surprised, like, I didn't get picked up. Like, I'm literally crawling. I'm just a kid, right? And the next thing I remember is I wake up in some stranger's, no, it wasn't a stranger, in a lady's house that I know. Apparently, they had showed up to that party, and things were happening to me that I didn't consent to. And they decided that they were going to put my clothes on and take me home, and that was, I thought for sure that was the time I was going to be done, right? This is completely mortifying and humiliating and disgusting, right? Nope. Wasn't the end, just wasn't the end. And I just kept living like that. And then, I hadn't talked to my mom in a number of years. I took off when I was about, I don't know, I took off early and never really went back. Like I said, I really despised my mom. And, there was a time I got drunk and passed out and drank and smoked some fun stuff and passed out in this guy's bed, and I aspirated. They called my mom, and my mom took me to her house. And I remember coming to on her bed, and she's looking at me. She's like, "You really got a problem. You've really got a problem." And I'm like, "I do." And I really believed it. It tells us, and I knew it, and I believed it then that I had a problem. I knew that there was something deeply wrong, right? And I didn't have the solution. I didn't have the solution. And again, I run away from her because I have this hate and disgust for her, right? And so I just lived like this for years, year after year after year after year, and I get married to this guy, and that was fun. Like, he had money and he worked for Boeing, and we had a really good time with the glass pipe, right? And and it just goes downhill. So, like, every time, right? I think I'm going to be okay. I'm not. And so that ended up in that marriage. I ended up going to treatment. Um, I faked an overdose because I knew I had a problem, right? I faked an overdose, and I'm down in Harborview at the psych ward. They're gonna put me in the psych ward, and I'm like, what? Really, no, this is not the place for me. It's like, this isn't the place for me. It's like, I really need help, right? I've got a drug and alcohol problem, right? And so they send me off to Kirkland Care Unit, and I stayed there for a couple of weeks, right? And it was a great reprieve, and I got some information while I was there. None of it stuck. It didn't stick. And then time goes by too fast. And then I get out and find out that my husband's having an affair. It's pretty ugly. I'm like, I leave him and I jump out of that frying pan into a fire with this guy, like, right away. And I get pregnant and I have this kid, and we're both, like, I tried to do better. I did do better as a mom. I really did do better as a mom. But I still drank. I smoked through my pregnancy, and by the grace of God, my kid came out whole and healthy, right? And so that relationship was hot, heavy, abusive. I found myself him beating the crud out of me, and he went into treatment. He called me and said, "What are you doing?" It happened to be my belly button birthday. I said, "Well, I'm getting high. What do you think I'm doing?" Right? And he's like, "Well, I'm not coming home." Right? And that was in 1990. So in 1990, I had thrown everything I had in the trash, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm done, right? And we started going to meetings, and for 14 years, I attended Narcotics Anonymous. And I went in there and I really thought I was doing everything that I was supposed to be doing, right? I really thought that I was working the steps. I really thought that I was using the sponsor that I had. And you know, it's really hard to to work an honest program and have a spiritual experience if you're not 100% honest, right? And I found that that's where I was, and sitting in the rooms and playing the game and walking the walk, and you know, not walking the walk, talking walk, whatever. I wasn't doing it all right, right? And you know, and I am divorced out of that relationship with that guy, married to this wonderful guy over here, and you know, and and I'm in the middle of an eating disorder, and this doctor gives me a bottle of pills that says takes as needed, right? And so I took as I thought I needed. I did not take as needed, right? And I'm 14 years clean, and in the middle of an eating disorder. I'm a mess. I am so spiritually uncentered. It's insane. I am just a mess. So I took a bunch of these pills, and I'm the one that jumps out of bed before the alarm goes off. I don't even need an alarm to get out of bed, right? And something's wrong. I'm not out of bed. I think my alarm was going off. He came downstairs, and literally I'm knocking on death's door. My lips were blue. My fingernails were blue. I'm literally on death's door. And next thing I remember is I'm laying on the bottom of the shower, with cold water running over me, and I perpetuate the lie that I'm okay, right? I perpetuate the lie for about a week that I'm okay. And somebody, my sponsor at the time, came to me and said, "You're full of it. You're full of it." And I was angry. I was so mad. You know, I was like, "How dare you?" You know, because I was like, I just wanted to kill myself, right? You know, I'm just like, "How dare you?" And it took a week, and I finally surrendered. I hit my knees and said, "You are right. You were right." And I started, like, that's that jumping off place. I hit the steps with a fervor that I never had before. And I was completely honest, and I was ready to be free from everything that bound me to my disease. And so, man, I went to work, you know, like if my sponsor said, "Be at my house Tuesday at 5, I was at her house Tuesday at 5. You know, when she said, "Write this down," I wrote it down. I had no idea. Like, why do I have to write this? I didn't argue. I just did it, right? I just did it. And, and I was introduced to a new experience that I'd never had before. I had never had an experience like this before. And when I finally got to that 4-step, you know, when like I said, I had this vile hate for my mother, vile hate for my mom. I would spit on her grave when she died. And I'm writing the steps, man, and for the first time in NA all of those years, I never got to that 4th column. Never did anybody say, "What did you do in any of these situations?" Nobody ever asked me that before I did the work out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was able to see the things that I had done that had hurt the people that I thought had wronged me, right? And at that moment, there was a profound alteration in the way that I was able to look at life. And it's completely miraculous. I wish I could articulate, like, just, it's that spiritual experience. It is that spiritual experience. It's that profound alteration in thinking and action. And, you know, and in 2016, I had visited, no, I'm going to rewind, hold on. And so I did that by step work, you know, and I can see that. And And I went about making amends, and I was really looking at those character defects that I couldn't see before because I was still blaming everybody else. Now I could see my character defects and where I was at wrong in the world. And I went down to visit my mom, and my mom lived in Arizona. And I walked into her house. I did not say a word. And my mom looked at me, and my mom said, "Something's changed. Something has changed. You do not have the anger on your shoulders anymore that you had for me." And at that moment, we both sat down on her couch, and I was able to make amends to my mom, right? A thing that I never, ever thought that I was ever going to do. I was never going to do that, right? And we go about our life, right? We go about our life, and we're raising kids, and getting involved in church. Like, life is good. Life is magnificent, right? And in 2016, her husband died. My mom's husband died, and my mom was strung out on drugs like you would not believe. And so her husband died. I'm down there. I'm trying to. That's a whole long story. She is detoxing off all these drugs. She's saying, "Mom, there's scorpions crawling all over me." I'm like, "Mom, if I saw scorpions, I wouldn't be standing here right now." But anyway. So anyway, her husband died. I sold her house and all of her things in Arizona and moved her up here, and moved her in about 2 miles down from where I lived. And I took care of her for the last 2 years of her life. And that is a miracle. When I would clip her fingernails, I felt the electricity of love between the two of us. It just felt electric. And that is the healing power of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That is the healing power of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so during 2018 was a really rough year. I had a really bad year. I was suicidal, homicidal. Our son was sick. His mom came down with cancer. There was a lot of betrayal. Like, there was a lot of stuff in 2018. I could not breathe. And I really wanted to die. But what I kept doing is suiting up and showing up and walking into Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to a meeting, and this woman was sitting at the front of the meeting. She's like, "I need to give up this position early because that's what I need to do." And I said, "I'll take it." And as Lara said, like, I'm very active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I love to serve AA, and taking on that position saved my life. I sat in that meeting, secretary that meeting, for a year and a half. And it literally saved my life because it gave me somewhere to show up, right? And I got to sit in the room when my mom took her last breath. I was literally in the room when my mom took her last breath with my husband, and I never would have thought that I would fall to the floor and cry in grief that my mom died, but I did. That's the gift. And what is bigger than that? My mom died knowing that she was loved by me because she didn't think I loved her, right? And so, Alcoholics Anonymous, yeah, that's it in a nutshell, right? And what I do in Alcoholics Anonymous today is, like, we started this meeting, and I love it. Sponsorship is like the most beautiful journey. It is the most beautiful journey. I have a sponsor. Some of my sponsees are here today, and there is nothing like sitting in my living room across from a woman, going through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and seeing people's life change like mine has, right? And I really, one of the highlights of my year last year, I think, Jeff and I were up at the International up in Canada, and ran into these two lovelies right here. And they had on these pink shirts, and the only way you can get these pink shirts is if you signed up to be a volunteer. And so I'm like, they're like, all you got to do is go down those stairs and go over here. And I'm like, this last thing I want to do this is fun for me, right? And so Jeff and I went and we signed up to be greeters. We did this 4-hour stint outside of one of the main buildings at the international conference. And I've met the most beautiful people in Alcoholics Anonymous by standing there with a name tag on and looking at other people's name tags, calling them by name and looking them in the eye and putting my hand out and saying, hi, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of my greatest experiences there was a man from Germany, grabbed my hands. My name is Glori. There's a song, Glory, Glory, Hallelujah, right? The man grabbed my hands and sang that whole song to me. Looked me in the eyes, and then when he was done, he kissed me on both cheeks, right? Like, because if it wasn't me, I would have just wanted to go on and enjoy my time there at the conference, right? But that was one of the biggest gifts, right? Like little, my husband has a story from a woman from Italy, I believe. Like she wanted his pink shirt, right? You only got those shirts. They didn't have any merch, right? And so some lady in Italy now has a shirt because my husband's got a tender heart, and so, Alcoholics Anonymous is great, and the steps are the key, right? The steps are the key to the spiritual solution, right? Like I said, if there's not a psychic change, there's no hope. And the way that I achieved that psychic change was through active work in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, in service to my fellows, and in gratitude to my higher power, right? Like if we come in here and skip the idea of God, we are really missing out on the bigger picture, right? And so I have like 3 minutes left, and I think I'm good about. I am really humbled and really grateful to all of my beautiful, you guys. I am so humbled that you are all here today. I love you guys so much. Thank you for showing up. And when I do, on my way into the meeting tonight, my phone rang. My brother is in Oklahoma, and my niece is laid in the hospital right now. She's having multiple seizures that they can't seem to get under control. And so if you guys would please hold Sophie in your thoughts, prayers, whatever your practice is, could you please do that? Thank you.
Thank you.